Do you feel the fight? Can you see the encroaching evil as it attacks your family and your community? It's time to rise up with the heart of a warrior and make a stand for those you love. You're listening to The Warrior's Heart. I'm Chuck Black, former F-16 fighter pilot, speaker, and author of 22 books written to strengthen the faith of you and your family. It is my heart to equip you to live for Jesus Christ in this compromised culture of today.
Today's episode continues where Chuck and I left off in our last episode on our discussion on apologetics. So let's go and turn our focus to someone who is saying, okay, you've convinced me.
Okay.
I need to dive into this.
Okay.
Okay. Where is a good place to start? Right? Because there are a lot of topics.
Okay.
Right? In that people can nitpick and jump into when it comes to defending your faith. So are there some general specifics that you think just would be good for anyone to know an answer to?
Yeah, great question. And I'm just going to put a disclaimer in here and say that there are some fantastic guys and gals out there that are really good at this. So this is just me and my experience with my family and a chance to talk to a lot of people out on the road. So, and it really is me from a very analytical engineering kind of mind kind of guy, sorting out what worked for me. And so that's what I'm sharing with you. I'm no expert, but what I do, and I think is very helpful, is to start asking questions of them and figure out where they depart the line of truth. And that's where you start. So, you might have somebody who just says, well, I'm just not so sure. I believe the Bible. I believe God created the world. I believe Jesus existed. I'm just not so sure that he actually was raised from the dead, the resurrection. That's where the departure happens. And if you don't believe in the resurrection, you're still, mightily lost.
Right.
So focus there. And there's some great apologetics, from historical documents to eyewitnesses to all kinds of things that can help them get on solid ground. There's that. And then there's the other extreme where there is no God. Everything happened by chance. Evolution is proven. It's a scientific fact. Well, their departure from the line of truth is at the very, very beginning.
Right.
That is the existence of God. So there you need to turn to physics and biology and more of the scientific, logical answers and things like that. Because there's no sense talking about the resurrection with that guy.
Right.
Right?
He's not there.
He's not there. And so that's been my MO for this, is to just, and you learn a lot by asking questions. I forget who it was that said, I never learned a thing when I was talking. And so when you can ask questions and learn everything you can about them, you're preparing yourself and equipping yourself for good, solid answers. And while they're talking and you're praying and listening, the Holy Spirit can move in, right? And so
that's when you're given that chance to change the heart and to ask
Yes.
for wisdom and meekness. And
Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, there have been a couple of situations where I've had this conversation as this person's talking and getting into it, a little panic sets in. Like, they're going a place, I'm not ready. This is just frightening. What do I do? What do I say? I'm going to look like an idiot. And I'll just pause, like, Lord, tell me how to deal with this stuff. And it's incredible. I mean, like, absolute divine inspiration that just cuts to the chase and just, wipes it out. So,
boom.
Yeah. So give yourself a chance to hear them. Give yourself a chance to pray. Give yourself a chance to think things through and prepare yourself. So that's my answer to that, is just figure out where they depart the line and then focus there. And that does mean that you're going to have to do some study and a pretty broad spectrum, right?
Right.
Everything from complete atheists to, subtle doctrinal differences in a particular denomination or something. So.
Right. So where do you dig in then? Do you have some good resources that people can look at? Some good that you have kind of vetted yourself?
Absolutely.
That you have looked into and said, yes, this is biblical, this is sound, this is a great place for someone to look into to start getting those answers for themselves so that they can be ready to speak.
Yes, and I think it would be good after this podcast. We'll make sure that those are available in some form or fashion, because this is where I get really excited about it, because some of these resources are just amazing. They're just powerful. The first one that comes to mind is one that really, it was the first book after my my episode of doubt was resolved with Johnny, that I turned to, and it was just a profound, eye-opening, truth-revealing book. And it's not a big, thick book. It's called Unlocking the Mysteries of Creation by Dennis Peterson. And it basically takes a lot of the evidence that science purports towards the evolution of the human species and just breaks it down and shows you exactly what the evidence is. And you would think that, they've got all kinds of these, fossils and things like that of the Piltdown man and Cro-Magnon man and all that. And in reality, he shows you the picture. This is what they really have. In some cases, it's like the fragment of a tooth, or maybe 5 or 6 bones from the jaw, and it's just like there's literally complete fabrication from just. And then in some of these cases, they found out that tooth was actually the tooth of a pig. But after 5 to 6 years later, it had made it into all the textbooks and all the museums, and it's too hard to fix, so it's out there.
Too far to bring back.
Exactly. And he just cuts to the chase and tells you exactly what it is. And so that's phenomenal. In fact, that book had such an impact on me. I took the family to the Smithsonian Institute, and we went to the Natural History Museum. And we walk in there, and the first thing is this great big T-Rex, It's like, wow, this is incredible. And you go and you just see room after room after room of all these amazing dinosaurs, and all just like crazy. Just
all the skeletons put together.
It's like, this is so exciting and cool. Of course, all the plaques are wrong, but anyway.
Right.
And then
millions of years ago.
And then you go to this one section, and they have this one room, and it's not very large, and it's the evolution of man. And you walk in there, and you can't find a fossil. You find a few pieces of bone, and then an artist's rendition of what everything else would look like.
Right.
And you're like, what? I mean, out there, thousands and thousands and thousands of dinosaur fossils
pieces
that are
of
250 million years older than man.
People are supposed to be.
And they can't find one single complete fossilized Piltdown man or whatever. This little old gal came up to me, and she says, welcome to the Smithsonian. Is there anything I can help you with?
Oh, that poor woman.
Do you have any questions?
Oh, no.
And, oh, my goodness. I just, Andrea was nudging me, just don't hear.
No.
Boy, did I have questions. And so I wanted to say, where are all the bones? I mean, you couldn't even fill a coffin with what you have here.
Right.
And so, but I didn't. I just smiled and said, no, thank you very much. But I took the kids and I said, guys, just take a look at this. Look at the overwhelming absence of evidence. And we're talking a difference of 250 million years. We should be walking over all of the fossils that should be left over from the evolution of man. And so anyway, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I get excited.
It was a good tangent.
So anyway, Unlocking the Mysteries of Creation by Dennis Peterson, that kind of led to that. And it was just amazing. Another one is a video called The Privileged Planet by Gonzalez and Richards. These were 2 scientists that looked at our planet and the 18 different incredibly tight, tolerant specs that had to be met for life to exist, from the ratio of the composition of the gases in the atmosphere to the water, the exact perfect distance from the sun, all the way to where the solar system is located in the Milky Way. If any one of those factors had been off by just a fraction amount, life couldn't exist. And so basically, and they didn't say this was a creationist video. This was just them saying, this is what had to happen for life to exist, and so we are on a privileged planet. Well, they were ostracized by the scientific community and it just completely blew up in their faces. But that video is available today. It's available on Amazon. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. It's powerful. It's kind of deep because it gets scientific, but it's an excellent resource. Another one that really had an impact on me was called Mount St. Helens, Seeing Noah's Flood Through Geology, and it's by Dr. Steve Austin. It's just incredible. Mount St. Helens, I remember I was in high school when it exploded. We were in Williston, North Dakota here, and the ash was falling on our. You weren't around.
I wasn't.
You were too young.
I wasn't here yet.
Yes, and so anyway, it was a dramatic event, and this geologist went out there, and basically said it was like a miniature post Noah's flood catastrophic glimpse, from petrification of trees to log masses to caverns being cut in hours through granite that they would say take millions of years. He said it was just phenomenal. So highly recommend that if you're into geology. It's a phenomenal resource. And then of course there are Answers in Genesis by Ken Ham. I'm actually going to the Ark encounter here in a couple of weeks and speaking there. Love Ken Ham's work and what they have done to bolster apologetics and the faith of young people. The Institute for Creation Research is also an excellent resource. And then one that I've discovered recently is Dr. James Tour. He chemical. He synthesizes chemicals at the molecular level. Mm-hmm. And so he's trying to recreate and will create molecules. He architects and organizes molecules. I mean, even to the point where they have made a multiple moleculed car that can drive across the table. And it takes 5 hours to go 3 inches, but they beat. There was a competition.
And you need a crazy microscope to be able to see it, but
yes,
it's there.
Exactly. But they created molecular engines on each of the wheels, and it's just incredible. So anyway, he accidentally got thrust into the origin of life world, and from his perspective, from a purely scientific perspective, and he doesn't use God in any of his arguments, he basically dismantles the lies that surround origin of life. He said biologists don't create anything. They observe things and say, well, this is what must have happened. He said, listen, I actually build these molecules, and I'm telling you that what's going on inside the cell is so incredibly complicated that there is no way that this could happen by random chance. He said, and there's an effort for us to create those molecules in the lab and basically create life in the lab to prove that God doesn't exist. He said, and 3 years ago they said, oh, we're just a few years away from this. Mm-hmm. But he said every year they learn more and more and more about the complexity of the cell.
And it gets harder and harder.
So the goalpost is getting further and further away. And so,
we're just a few years away. Yeah. We can do what God did.
And he'll take these guys on head to head. He is very passionate.
I love it.
And he's very, very intellectual. He's a super intelligent guy. And I have just loved listening to his videos. So those are my favorite resources. I know there's a lot out there, but those are the ones that really hit home for me. Everything from astronomy to biology to geology. I think you got to hit all the fields. Mm-hmm. And of course, all of these things needed to be wrapped in biblical truth. But when you're debating, when you're giving an answer mm-hmm. To somebody who's got a scientific mind, you need to be prepared in those fields. So
yeah. Those are great resources. You sent a few of those in the family chat. I think you sent a video of the molecular engineer guy.
Yes.
And I watched it, and I remember being like, whoa, this is crazy, fascinating.
Yeah. Good.
I've got a second question for you.
Oh, okay.
Another question of the podcast. I'm not sure how you're going to answer this one, mainly because I know you are such a busy guy.
Okay. Uh-oh. I don't know where this is
You
going.
are probably one of the busiest people that I know.
Okay.
But is there something on your to-be-read list that you want to read when you have the time?
Okay.
What is number one on your, when I get the chance, I want to read this next?
This is easy.
Oh, really?
I actually started it.
What?
Yes. It is so I went down to Texas to see Reese and Marcy and their new little baby.
Yeah.
And the other two boys. And our best friend lives there too, Jeff Roach. And so he shared with me a book that he was reading. Mm-hmm. I think it's called Masters of the Air.
Oh.
It's a World War II on the 8th Air Force that was created to defeat the Nazis and win the air campaign during World War II. And it was the same Air Force that my dad was as a World War II vet. In fact, the very first combat mission that was flown out of England by the 8th Air Force came from Underwood, which was the base that my dad was stationed at. Now, he wasn't there at that time. He arrived a little bit later.
Okay.
But there was a connection there.
Connection, yeah. And they just made a TV series about it too,
They
didn't
did a TV series. I'm trying to get through the book. It's a 600-page book.
Okay.
So I didn't pick something easy for the time that I have or the lack of time that I have, but I'm excited. I started reading. I'm on page 50 and I just can't stop thinking about it or talking about it. And I love it because it just gives you the history. But what's fascinating is it takes you into the lives of the people. Those young 19 and 20-year-old guys that were putting everything on the line, and so many didn't make it back. And the burden of a completely new type of warfare the world had never invented before or knew before was in the hands of these young guys, and they were making it up as they went. And the courage and the stories, and it's just incredible. So yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to get through it because 50 pages in 3 weeks is not really good, but I fit it in when I
there
can.
is no medal for finishing a book fast.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe on the 7-week trip for the conferences, I'll find an evening or two that I can
find a little bit of time in there. Awesome. Well, jumping back in, thank you for that answer, though.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. It's
Yeah,
fun
good
to know
question.
that you're reading something.
Yeah,
for fun.
and truth is, Tess, I haven't read a book other than mine because of all of the things that are going on in life for years. And I used to just love reading.
Yeah.
I read all the time. But now, because I'm so busy and I'm trying to write for you guys,
Yep.
there's not a lot of extra time. So I'm excited about this. So
That's awesome. All right, jumping back in. This is pretty much my last question that I have for you.
okay.
And it is, can you give us an example of something that you have looked into and the answers that you found?
Oh,
All right. So what's something that
see.
you looked into and what you found and sort of what that process looked like
okay.
for you?
I think the things that come to mind are very closely connected to the resources that I just gave too. The most profound one was the study and the research that Answers in Genesis has given in regard to the flood. Today's scientists carbon date things, and they use carbon dating to place the age of fossils and things like that. But they will tell you that if there was any sort of global catastrophic event, the carbon dating goes out the window. It undermines all of the accuracy of the carbon dating. And so I don't think that those that don't believe in God or that don't believe there was a global flood have any idea just how transformative it was of this planet. And I mean, it shook up everything. And once you embrace that as a possibility,
Right.
scientifically, just from a scientific perspective, everything starts to fall in place. Everything you see, all the research, it just all so makes sense. Down to the stratification of the different layers. I had a discussion with somebody I respected very highly, and we were going down the river on a boat, and you look over, you can see all these layers in the cliffs.
Yeah.
And I said, so do you really think there was 6,000 years of just this? That's all there was on the planet, on this section of the Earth, and then 6,000. I said, take an aquarium and fill it with a bunch of dirt and different, and shake it up, and see what happens. It's going to sift out in layers,
Yeah.
So that's, the Earth is a big aquarium.
Yeah.
And so all of these things, in fact, at one point, it was down about 4 or 5 feet. There was a Coca-Cola can in the middle of one of the stratifications. I pulled it out and I couldn't help myself. I said, this was the Coca-Cola era. It happened 250 million years ago. And it had been in there. And if you didn't, from purely geological, just by the depth and the layers and stuff, it would be back thousands and thousands and thousands
Right.
of years. But obviously, the river and the erosion and the layering of layers, and you can see where a flood would just dismantle any sort of, what do they call it? Uniform aging of the earth.
Right.
Yeah. Once you start throwing catastrophes in there, it's all doing it. So that was one. Once I embraced Noah's flood in its full understanding, in its biblical story level, literally everything started falling in place, and all of my research kind of hinged off of that. So that was one very specific example. But each of those other resources I gave you were benchmarks and still are, like discovering James Tour just recently here, like within the last year. I'm just so excited about answers that are coming out of that research and study. So
Yeah. Well, when you're looking for resources, right? Because obviously these are not the only resources out there that are valuable and have merit. How do you sift through what is true, and when someone is just exaggerating or only pulling what they want to see in order to give the answer that you want, or even if something's completely based off of a lie, how are we supposed to discern that?
that's a really good question. And man, in today's world with the internet, it's sometimes hard to figure out what's true and what's not, right? So, well, I think the first thing is making sure that you have the right attitude about it, making sure you're analytical, objective. It's really easy to believe something we want to believe.
Right.
And so even from a Christian perspective. And so, but there's also nothing more damaging, if you propound a lie and then it's not true. So just all I can say is just really do your homework, really look into all the different perspectives. Don't be afraid of reading an evolutionist column. We get Science News, which is completely evolutionary. I read it all the time. I know that it's full of lies.
Right.
But I also know that there's also a chance for well-intentioned believers that exaggerate truth, and that becomes a lie as well. That doesn't do us any good. So I think completely being objective, putting it to the test, and again, the ultimate source of truth is the Bible, right? Is the Word. So testing it against the Word to see if it's valid or not. And then I also tap into other people, experts in the field that I trust, that have been down the road, and I still listen to them with a discerning and objective, ear. But certainly they've done the research, and they would definitely be able to point me to resources as well that can validate whatever is being, discussed. So,
Right.
I feel like I'd like to share one thing about for parents out there, specifically, when a child asks you something you don't know.
Okay.
Right? What if the question's really hard, and what if you don't have an answer? We talked a little bit about that, about making sure you study, and you can say, "Hey, let me look into this, and let me get back to you," okay? And then go to work.
Right.
But there are some questions that you may not be able to find an answer for, and I can tell you. I think we're probably getting close to closing up here. I'll finish this up with a story. When I was in the 17th Tactical Fighter Squadron at Shaw Air Force Base, I had my encounter with Johnny, and very grateful for him. I will love and respect that man forever for having the courage to do that with me. And when I went back to the squadron after being mentored for weeks, I had a new passion to be a witness. And so I started, carefully, lovingly witnessing to my fellow pilots. and in one-on-one situations. And then my good friend Jeff came along, and we covenanted together to pray for the squadron every day. So we'd get in a briefing room, we'd pray for the pilots in the squadron for safety, but also for a chance to witness to them. And so that was kind of our mission for a number of years there. And it was time for me to exit, and I had a flight commander who was a combat veteran now. He did well over in Desert Storm. He became a flight commander. I was his assistant flight commander. He ended up getting chosen to be the F-16 demonstration pilot for the entire eastern half of the United States. And so when there were air shows, that was him up there doing the stuff. And so anyway, we have a Finney flight. That's the last flight that you fly. And I'm telling you, Heater set up the most amazing Finney flight I'd ever seen with, engaging with F-15s and then teaming up with B-52s and doing low levels and shooting guns and dropping bombs. It was just like 2 hours of the most amazing Finney flight you could ever imagine. And so we got done, got back to the squadron. The squadron was having a hail and farewell for me. And in the middle of that, after all the planes are on the ground, they ring the bell, and then the pilots can go drink. And
yes.
I didn't. Jeff didn't. And so anyway, we were in the squadron, and Heater came to me and he said, "Hey, Chuck, Jeff, you guys got a minute?" And I said, "Sure, Heater, what's up?" He said, "Well, I've been watching you two. There's something different about you guys. And I'd love to have a few minutes to ask you some questions, if you don't mind." I'm like, "Absolutely."
Right.
So we sat down in the middle of the lounge with music and guys drinking and, having a celebration. And for an hour and a half, he asked us all kinds of apologetic questions. I mean, everything. There was nothing off limits. And we sat there and with meekness and respect answered as many questions as we possibly could. But I will never forget the last question he asked. He said, "Chuck, are you telling me that some tribe down in the jungles of Africa that have never heard about Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross, that they're just going to go to hell because they've never heard that?" Right? I mean, they're condemned to hell just because of where they're born. And folks, I don't have a good answer for that. And I thought about it, and I was kind of that little panicky sit in and praying, right? And I finally looked at him and I said, "Heater, listen. All I know is what the Bible says. It says that the very creation is evidence of the Godhood, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that it says that because of God's creation, no man has an excuse." Now, I don't know how that is interpreted or relates to somebody in that situation that you just conveyed to me. The truth is, I don't really have a good answer for you. And I can tell that no amount of my conversating with you is going to resolve that in your life. I said, but listen, don't let my inability to answer your question to your satisfaction keep you from the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, because you're going to be held accountable for what you know, and you know the truth.
Yeah.
And that's the best I could do. And he sat back. He said, "Okay, thank you." And so that's how it ended. And so I don't try to pretend to know more than I do.
Right.
That doesn't get anybody anywhere. Just be honest, be transparent, be humble, be kind, and let your heart be full of love, and do a lot of praying. So, okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chuck. That wraps up our session on apologetics today. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we talk about this topic. I'm sure it will continue to be woven into all of our upcoming topics, but thank you for today.
Thank you, Tess. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Warrior's Heart. You can find out more about Chuck's action-packed Christian allegory novels for ages 8 to adult on his website, chuckblack.com. If you want to hear about new episodes of The Warrior's Heart, please hit the subscribe button below, and please hit the like button if you felt strengthened by today's episode. Also, you can stay up to date with the latest of Chuck Black's resources for Christian families, including new faith-building books and audios, by subscribing to his email newsletter. Follow the link in the description below to sign up. Finally, It is our sincere prayer that this podcast would equip you, brave warrior of Christ, to put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand.